"Let's be honest, Dana," Grant Ellison said, reclining in his ergonomic leather chair with the kind of smug grin that came from never having earned anything on his own. "Women your age just don't move fast enough for where tech is headed. I need adaptable people." I sat across from him, hands calmly folded in my lap, watching this 33-year-old executive, fresh out of his father's shadow, dismiss 2 decades of my dedication like I was yesterday's outdated software. 21 years. That's how long I devoted to Kendor Systems, a growing logistics tech firm based in Columbus, Ohio. I'd built the entire back-end operations from scratch, every workflow, protocol, and shipping integration. I'd trained each wave of new hires and kept the place running through multiple crises, budget freezes, and chaotic leadership transitions. Now here I was, being spoken to like an old file ready for deletion. "I understand completely," I said, delivering the same smooth, professional tone I'd used with difficult clients over the years. Inside, my pulse raced, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing it. "You have to do what you think is best for the company." Grant's eyebrows lifted slightly. He was expecting a fight, maybe some tears. Instead, he got poise. From a 57-year-old woman who knew corporate power games better than he ever would. "Well, that's surprisingly mature," he said, flipping a document as if the matter was already behind him. "Most folks take this kind of thing personally." "I'm not most folks," I replied, rising to my feet and smoothing my gray slacks. "When would you like my handoff completed?" "End of the week is fine. HR will finalize everything." His eyes were already back on his screen, mentally erasing me the same way he'd just removed me from the org chart. I turned and walked out of his sleek, glass-walled office, the one that overlooked the operations floor I had built. The irony wasn't lost on me. The system that kept his company profitable, that was mine. From vendor networks to custom routing algorithms, I'd designed every piece of it. My name is Dana Whitaker, and until 6 minutes ago, I was the director of operations at Kendor Systems. Grant saw a woman who no longer fit his idea of innovation. What he didn't see was that I'd been quietly preparing my next move for months, and his strategic decision was about to cost him far more than he ever imagined. I'd seen it coming for months, ever since Matthew Ellison, founder of Kendor Systems, started handing more control to his son Grant. The company had begun to shift, and not in a good way. Grant filled the office with freshly minted MBAs from Ivy League schools, confident that youth and buzzwords could replace experience and operational know-how. What he didn't know was that for the past 6 months, I'd been quietly consulting with a rising competitor, Clearwell Dynamics. Their VP of Operations, Brian Langston, had been calling me every few months for 3 years. Every time Kendor landed a major client or hit a milestone, he'd reach out. "Dana, we need someone like you," he'd say. "Name your price." I'd always turned him down. I was loyal to Matthew, who had given me my first big break back in 2002 when the company was just a dozen people operating out of a converted print shop in Columbus. But loyalty should go both ways. And watching Grant disrespect the very people who built Kendor, people like me, had worn that loyalty down to the thread. Ironically, I already had lunch scheduled with Brian on the very morning I was fired. What Grant assumed was my farewell meal turned out to be my final interview. "You're free," Brian said with a grin as we sat in a quiet corner booth at the Iron Oak, a local spot favored by senior execs. "When can you start?" "Monday," I replied without hesitation. "But there's something you should know." I slid a thick binder across the table. I built every operational system at Kendor, from vendor integration and shipping protocols to crisis response checklists and client onboarding playbooks. Brian's eyes sharpened as he flipped through the tabs. "You're saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying Grant Ellison just fired the only person who truly understands how his company runs, and I kept meticulous documentation. Legally. No non-compete, no retention clause, just a generic severance and a rushed exit. Grant had been so eager to get rid of me, he didn't bother with the details. "We've been trying to win over Kendor's top 3 clients for years," Brian said, eyes on a map of logistics corridors I'd color-coded. "This alone could save us millions." "They've got 60 days left on their contracts," I said casually. And I know what terms are on the table. Brian waved down the waiter. Champagne. This is going to be a very profitable move, Dana. I smiled, picturing Grant's smug face from earlier that day. He had no idea what he'd just triggered. Grant called an all-hands meeting that Tuesday morning to unveil what he called strategic organizational changes. Standing at the front of the conference room, trying far too hard to sound authoritative, he began with the usual corporate fluff. As we move forward in an increasingly competitive market, he announced, we need leadership that can adapt to new technologies and evolving industry demands. That's why we've made some necessary changes in personnel. From the back of the room, I watched the puzzled looks ripple across the faces of longtime colleagues. These were people who had worked beside me for years. They didn't need to ask who he was referring to. Dana Whitaker has decided to pursue other opportunities, Grant continued, not even glancing my way. We thank her for her contributions and wish her the best in her future endeavors. I didn't flinch. I simply folded my arms and waited for the charade to end. After the meeting, my office turned into a quiet stream of whispered disbelief. If stories like this one speak to something you've lived, felt, or witnessed, don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter might be the one that proves your quiet strength can change everything. The first to arrive was Michelle, my assistant operations manager. She closed the door softly behind her and leaned in. This is insane, she said. Half of our vendor contracts are in your name. The route management system was literally your design. How does he expect any of this to run without you? You'll figure it out, I replied gently, continuing to pack my things. Grant seems confident in the new direction. What I didn't say was that I'd already spent Monday and Tuesday methodically backing up every vendor contact, password, and procedural document to my personal account. Not theft, just thorough records of the systems I had built from the ground up. By Wednesday, I had already started remote consulting for Clearwell Dynamics. Brian Langston had wasted no time. Their legal team had combed through my severance paperwork and confirmed what I already knew. There were no restrictions on using the knowledge and systems I had created independently. Thursday morning, I made 3 calls. The first was to Patricia Holmes at Redmont Distribution, our largest client. We'd worked together for 9 years. Dana, tell me the rumors aren't true, she said the moment she picked up. I'm afraid they are, I replied. Grant believes the company needs younger leadership. A long pause, then, he has no idea what he's just thrown away. We've saved millions thanks to your systems. Let me know if you ever want to revisit our distribution partnership. The next 2 calls were to Gerald Perkins at Stratusware and Andrea Sullivan at Blue Arc Tech. Both responded the same way. By Thursday afternoon, Grant's brilliant strategic change had just cost Kendor Systems their 3 biggest clients, and he still had no idea. Friday morning arrived with a deceptive stillness. It was supposed to be my final day at Kendor Systems, a quiet exit marked by the transfer of duties to Grant Ellison's new operations manager, a 28-year-old named Chase Freeman. Fresh out of grad school with a shiny MBA and 0 experience in logistics, Chase was the poster child for Grant's modernization initiative. Grant believed fresh thinking would reinvent everything we'd built. What he didn't understand was that logistics wasn't a playground for abstract theories. It was about relationships, precision, and the kind of detail you only master through time. I arrived early, like always, and found Chase already at his desk, eyes darting across a chaotic spreadsheet, fingers frozen mid-keystroke. Good morning, Chase, I greeted, keeping my tone friendly. How's your first week treating you? He looked up, visibly relieved. Dana, thank God. I've been trying to generate a route optimization report, but the system keeps freezing. Nothing makes sense. Did I do something wrong? I offered a sympathetic nod. It can be finicky. Did you update the vendor portal passwords? They reset every 90 days. Vendor portal? He blinked. I don't even know what that is. Grant didn't mention anything? Oh, I said, letting that one syllable hang in the air. Well, there are 17 different systems. Each has its own credentials and update schedule. If one's out of sync, the whole routing platform fails. His face drained of color. Can you walk me through it? I'd love to, I said with a warm smile, glancing at my watch. But I'm due in HR in 10 minutes to finalize my departure paperwork, and then I have a lunch appointment. He didn't need to know that lunch was with Patricia Holmes from Redmont Distribution, where we'd be signing the paperwork transferring their entire account to Clearwell Dynamics. After my exit interview, where I simply stated that Grant appears confident in the company's direction, I returned to my office to grab the last of my things. The phone rang. Dana Whitaker, Operations Director. I answered out of habit. Dana, it's Gerald Perkins from Stratusware. I need to talk about our renewal. Of course. What can I help you with? Well, I got a call from Clearwell Dynamics this morning. Their proposal was compelling. But before I move forward, I wanted to talk to you directly. I looked out at the operations floor, my floor, and smiled slightly. I appreciate that, Gerald. As of today, I'm no longer with Kendor Systems. Oh, he said quietly. That changes everything. Before I make any decisions, I wanted to speak with you directly, Gerald Perkins said, his voice carrying the weight of uncertainty. Through the glass office wall, I could see Grant Ellison pacing on a call, gesturing like he was closing some grand deal. He looked entirely too pleased with himself. I appreciate that, Gerald, I replied. But as of today, I'm no longer with Kendor Systems. You'll need to direct any account questions to Grant. That's exactly what I was afraid of, Gerald sighed. Dana, you've been our main contact for over 6 years. You know our operations inside and out, our delivery windows, constraints, preferences. We're not comfortable making a change midstream. I understand, I said gently. Trust and continuity are everything in this business. So, where are you headed? Because if you're available, Stratusware would gladly follow you. I glanced toward Grant's office again, where he was now slumped in his chair, clicking repeatedly at something on his screen that clearly wasn't responding. I'll be joining Clearwell Dynamics on Monday, I told him. Brian Langston is Vice President of Operations. It's a sharp team, well run. Perfect, Gerald replied. Have Brian reach out Monday morning. We'll begin the transition process. As I hung up, I could feel the tension in the air shift. Grant's phone call had ended, and now he stared at his monitor, frowning and tapping with increasing urgency. The real unraveling had begun. Monday morning brought the chaos I had expected. As I settled into my new office at Clearwell, my old cell buzzed nonstop. 7 missed calls from various Kendor numbers in just the first hour. At 9 a.m., Brian appeared in my doorway, grinning like he'd hit the jackpot. 3 contracts, he said, waving a thick folder. Redmont Distribution, Stratusware, and Blue Arc Tech all signed this morning. Total value? I asked. Just over $12 million a year, he said, barely containing his excitement. That's great, I replied. Though somewhere beneath my satisfaction was a quiet ache. Not guilt, but a flicker of empathy for the people still stuck under Grant's failing leadership. Grant called our main line 4 times in the last hour, Brian added. Their shipping systems crashed. None of the vendor portals are responding. I nodded slowly. Today's the first Monday of the new quarter. The vendor passwords would have auto-reset. It's part of the security protocol. And Grant didn't know? Grant doesn't know a thing about operations, I said. He thought everything just ran itself. Brian laughed. Guess he's about to learn the hard way. I pulled up the new client files on my Clearwell Dynamics laptop. Let's get the logistics team to schedule install meetings with Redmont, Stratusware, and Blue Arc, I told my coordinator. I want full site surveys done by next week. Routing protocols, warehouse flows, the whole picture. What I didn't mention was that the vendor password issue Kendor Systems was facing wasn't random. I had designed that system myself. The password resets followed a very specific pattern, one I'd created for maximum security and only I fully understood. Sure, Grant could figure it out. Eventually. But eventually wasn't good enough in a logistics world that lived and died by deadlines. His clients didn't have time to wait. My personal phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Matthew Ellison, Grant's father and the founder of Kendor Systems. Mr. Ellison? I answered, keeping it formal. Dana? What the hell is going on over there? His voice was tight. Grant said you left Friday. Now our systems are down, and I've had 3 of our biggest clients call to say they're walking. I'm sorry to hear that, I said evenly. Don't give me the corporate brush off, he snapped. We've known each other over 20 years. Grant told me you left to pursue new opportunities. This can't be a coincidence. I paused. Grant believed the company needed younger leadership, someone more in tune with modern technology. I respected his decision. A long silence. He did this without asking me, Matthew muttered. His tone turned sharp. Dana, I need you to come back. Whatever Clearwell offered, I'll double it. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Ellison, I said, but I've already signed with Clearwell. Today's my first day. Then consult with us, he said quickly. At least help Chase get his feet under him. I glanced out at the floor below, where Clearwell's warehouse was running like clockwork. I'm open to consulting, I said, but my standard rate is $500 an hour, with a 40-hour weekly minimum. He was quiet. I knew he was calculating. $20,000 a week, just to fix the mess his son made. We'll pay it, he said finally. I'll need the consulting agreement in writing, I added, along with a signed acknowledgement from Grant that my expertise is required. A pause. And, Mr. Ellison, I want a written apology from Grant for his comments about women my age being unable to keep up. Another silence. Then, I'll talk to him. Take your time, I said. But your vendor systems reset again next Monday. Take your time, I said pleasantly. Though you should know, your vendor authentication lockout resets every 7 days. If those passwords aren't updated by next Monday, you'll lose access to all your primary shipping partners. I ended the call and turned back to my new client files, feeling a deep satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, I was working with a team that valued precision and people. Tuesday morning brought escalation. At 7 a.m., my personal phone rang, dragging me out of the peaceful rhythm of my new routine. I let it go to voicemail and played the message while making coffee. Dana, this is Grant Ellison. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We need to talk about the operational transition. Our systems are experiencing technical issues, and Chase needs your help resolving some authentication problems. No apology. No acknowledgement that he'd fired me 4 days earlier with a smug smirk and a comment about my age. Just a rushed plea for help now that his strategic restructuring was in freefall. I deleted the message and headed into Clearwell Dynamics, where my new team was already rolling out improvements for 3 major new accounts. Around 10 a.m., Brian Langston knocked gently on my office door, looking more serious than usual. Dana, he said, Matthew Ellison is downstairs. He says he needs to speak with you personally. It sounds urgent. I saved my work. Send him up. When Matthew entered, he looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in a week. His signature silver hair was unkempt, and the usually crisp lines of his designer suit hung loose and wrinkled. He dropped into the chair across from me. Dana, I owe you an apology, he went on. Grant told me this was a mutual decision, that you were looking for a change. That's not quite what happened, I said quietly. I know that now, he replied. I had a very illuminating talk with Michelle yesterday. She told me what Grant actually said to you. His jaw clenched. Those comments about your age and capabilities, completely unacceptable, and not what this company stands for. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. You helped me build Kendor Systems into what it is. Firing you wasn't just wrong, it was corporate suicide. He paused, then added, Grant's young. He made a mistake. Dana, I want you to come back. We'll restore your position, increase your salary by 20%, and Grant will report to you. The offer was tempting, very tempting, but I thought about Grant's smug expression when he fired me, so confident, so certain that a woman in her 50s couldn't possibly keep up. His words echoed in my mind. We need people who can adapt. I smiled faintly at the memory. That's a generous offer, I told Matthew Ellison, but I'm quite happy here at Clearwell Dynamics. They understand the value of institutional knowledge. Matthew's shoulders slumped. Then, at least help us salvage what we can. Our vendor relationships are collapsing. The shipping software is locked down. Chase is completely lost. I told you my consulting rate yesterday, I reminded him. $500 an hour, 40-hour minimum. He nodded. I had legal draft this last night. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across my desk. I reviewed it. It was solid, comprehensive, and clearly very expensive. But something was missing. Where's Grant's written apology? I asked, not looking up. Matthew winced. He's reluctant to put anything in writing. Legal liability concerns. Then I'm afraid we don't have a deal. I pushed the contract gently back across the desk. Grant didn't just terminate me poorly. He did it with open discrimination and disrespect. If he wants my help fixing the mess, he needs to acknowledge what he did publicly. Dana, please, Matthew said. We're bleeding money every day this continues. Then Grant should start learning about vendor authentication protocols, I said, rising. I have a client meeting to prepare for. That Wednesday afternoon, the moment I'd quietly anticipated finally arrived. Brian buzzed my office. Dana, Grant Ellison is downstairs. Wants to see you. Looks rough. Send him up, I replied calmly, organizing the contracts on my desk. And, Brian, leave the door open. When Grant walked in, the arrogant stride was gone. He looked pale, drawn, like a man holding his company together with fraying string. Dana, he said, forcing authority back into his voice. We need to discuss this situation. Please, have a seat, I replied pleasantly, motioning toward the chair across from mine. How can Clearwell Dynamics assist you today? His face flushed at the formality. Cut the act, Dana. You know why I'm here. I'm afraid I don't. Be specific. His posture collapsed. The vendor systems, the shipping protocols, the clients. You designed everything, and it's falling apart. We both know this isn't a coincidence. You're right, I said, leaning forward, voice steady. It's not. I did design those systems, Grant. Over 20 years of my life went into building them. And you fired me because, in your words, women my age can't keep up with technology. That's not what he began, but I raised a hand. Let me finish, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. You dismissed me without warning, without transition planning, and with outright discriminatory language. You equated innovation with youth and assumed that institutional knowledge was disposable. Grant shifted in his seat, his confidence unraveling. Look, maybe I was hasty. Maybe I didn't fully understand the value of what you built. Maybe, I said with a faint smile. But here's what we do know. In just 4 days, you've lost 3 key clients worth $12 million annually. Your shipping infrastructure is completely locked, and your new operations manager is unraveling, trying to comprehend systems that took me 2 decades to master. He exhaled shakily. Please, help us. Name your price. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. It's simple. I want a written apology, acknowledging your discriminatory remarks and your mistake in terminating me. It must be posted publicly on the company's website and sent to every vendor and client I supported. His eyes widened. That's career suicide. Maybe, I said, but it's also called accountability. Thursday morning arrived with the quiet thunder I'd been expecting. Brian Langston burst into my office, phone in hand, face lit with stunned satisfaction. Dana, you need to see this, he said, setting a stack of reports on my desk. Kendor Systems just lost their primary contract with Continental Express. Effective immediately. They're shut down. No delivery network. No outbound shipments. I reviewed the termination notice, not with malice, but with measured interest. Continental had been Kendor's backbone for 15 years, a deal I personally negotiated, built on trust and precision. There's more, Brian said. Chase Freeman submitted his resignation this morning. He sent an internal email admitting he's overwhelmed and not qualified to manage these systems. That's unfortunate, I replied, though not unexpected. Chase was smart enough to realize the truth. He was thrown into a role meant for someone with decades of field-tested knowledge. My phone lit up again. Matthew Ellison. Dana, please, he said, his voice frayed. Grant will issue the apology. Written, public, whatever you want. Just help us salvage what's left." "It's too late for that, Mr. Ellison," I said softly, watching Clearwell's shipping dashboards run like clockwork in real time. "Continental Express terminated your shipping contract this morning," I said evenly. "Without them, Kendor can't fulfill orders for any of your remaining clients." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. How did you know about Continental?" Matthew Ellison asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because Patricia Holmes from Redmont Distribution sits on their board," I replied. "When she informed them of Grant's comments and the way I was let go, they decided they didn't want to be associated with a company that disrespects experienced professionals, especially ones responsible for operational success." "This will destroy us," he murmured. "Yes," I said, not with malice, but with certainty. "It probably will. Grant made a decision last Friday, and now he gets to live with the consequences." I ended the call and returned to my work, reviewing the integration timeline for Blue Arc Tech's new onboarding. Clearwell Dynamics had already begun absorbing Kendor's former clients into our systems, with every process refinement I'd spent years perfecting now running smoothly. Outside my office window, I watched a line of delivery trucks roll out from our distribution hub. Each one carried our new clients' products, efficient, on time, and fully optimized under the new protocols I'd developed. The future looked bright. For the first time in years, I was building something where my voice was heard and my work was valued, not in spite of my experience, but because of it. Looking back on those pivotal days, I realized something unexpected. Grant's attempt to discard me had done the exact opposite. It had freed me. It had propelled me into a role that offered not just opportunity, but dignity. I wasn't just rebuilding someone else's vision anymore. I was helping shape the next phase of intelligent logistics from the ground up, with people who didn't need to be convinced that knowledge and history mattered. Grant's downfall wasn't just personal. It was systemic. He believed leadership came from power and trendiness, not from earned respect or understanding. He gambled the future of his company on appearances and paid the price. And in the end, it served as a powerful reminder to everyone watching that experience, when dismissed, doesn't disappear. It finds a better place to thrive. And thrive I would. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. It means something to know that stories like mine still matter, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Was there a moment that resonated with you? A time you were told you were too old, too slow, or no longer a fit? If so, I hope you'll leave a comment below. Not just for me, but for others who may need to see they're not alone. Let's support one another, because experience is never a weakness. It's a strength that too many companies realize too late. I'm Dana Whitaker, and while this story started with humiliation, it ended in empowerment. If you were rooting for me as things fell apart for Kendor Systems and came together at Clearwell Dynamics, I can't tell you how much that means. This isn't just my story. It's a reminder that what some see as the end is often just the beginning. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or forced out because of your age, your experience, or your quiet professionalism, I want you to remember this. You have more power than they think. Here's my advice. From one professional to another, always document your work, always know your worth, and never let someone else define your expiration date. You built systems, you trained teams, you solved problems they didn't even understand. And if you're ever pushed out, make sure they know you didn't disappear. You simply moved forward. Smarter, sharper, stronger. If this story moved you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Quiet strength deserves a louder platform, and there are many more stories like mine to share. And who knows? The next one might just be yours. Let's build a community that honors wisdom, rewards resilience, and never underestimates what experience can do.